Welcome everyone, Herr Wang in the house this evening, bringing to y'all a bottle of Gigondas, or Gigonda, whichever you prefer in your pronunciation. Um, it is a wine coming from the southern Rhone Valley in France, predominantly Grenache, a little bit of Syrah Mourvedre. They tell me it's 20% Syrah, 5% Mourvedre. We're going to talk a little bit kind of about the area of Gigondas and where it is, and maybe what the soils are like, what the climate and terroir is like, and also this is my first video, so kind of testing some things out. I'll probably do a couple different runs, but to start off with, like any wine tasting, you're going to want to pour yourself a little bit in a glass or some kind of vessel that you can drink from. I'm also going to let you know that years ago I trained through the quartermaster sommeliers, and so I actually haven't visited their tasting regiment or tasting grade in quite some time, but it is handy to have something along those lines to kind of guide you through tasting, especially if you're new or maybe like myself revisiting. I work in the wine industry, predominantly on the vineyard side, but years ago I sold many a bottle of wine and through distribution channels predominantly, and in doing so I had the opportunity to taste a lot of wine, and so for me this is kind of a revisiting to some of my roots and what I really love most about wine, which is tasting it, drinking it, talking about it, and enjoying it. And even the first when I noticed when I was talking about just pouring this wine, it's got this gorgeous ruby, garnet ruby color, very brilliant and clear. And that's probably section, yep, that would be 1 on the Quartermaster Somms tasting grid. Is clarity and visible sediment, but this beautiful, like beautiful ruby color. The light's just bouncing off of it, and so no funky, funny business there. No solid particle tartrates floating around, which is okay anyways, but none of us do want a chunky mouthful of sediment. So I'm gonna give it a little sniff first and kind of just see where it's at right out the bottle. I always like to do that. Most wines, oh sorry, I didn't really mention this. This is a Kirkland signature bottling, so from Costco, 2017 vintage. But it's always nice, like I was saying, it's always nice to stick your nose in the glass right when you open it. Most wines, especially reds, certainly open up over time. Some after 5 or 10 minutes, some might need a half an hour, and sometimes even the next day if it's really young or a really big brawny wine. Off the bat, this one's a little dusty, still seems a little tight to me. Definitely some pretty kind of pomegranate and cherry fruit there. I'm kind of wondering what their oak regiment was. Maybe they added some oak alternatives in some kind of form to put that into expression, although that's not particularly very popular in the old world, although it is getting used a little bit more so over there than maybe in past times. Some darker fruits are coming out. So yeah, this is definitely a young wine that I want to give some time to. So in a little bit after I kind of describe the wine, I'll taste it a little bit. We'll talk about the area, and I'll stop the video and then come back and we'll revisit it maybe 20 or 30 minutes from now. I've also got a little water with me. Helps to cleanse the palate from time to time. So Gigondas in the southern Rhone Valley, so pretty warm Mediterranean climate. Gigondas is definitely, though, it's on the northern side of the southern Rhone, and like most of the major appellations of the southern Rhone, Châteauneuf-du-Pape is one of the main ones as well, Vaqueira, and then there's a bunch of different villages as well. But Gigondas is a pretty well-known one, and just tidying up on my notes and such. But Gigondas is no more than 80%, but usually for sure predominantly Grenache based. So it's kind of their king grape, if you will, in that area. That, as it is in the northern part of the southern Rhone, is maybe a little bit cooler for sure than the southern parts, and kind of helps to give a long, lengthening ripening process to the Grenache grape, which really likes that. A quick ripening, you kind of get very quickly over stewed fruit characteristics, and the grape kind of falls apart on the vine, and the cluster falls apart. So a long growing season that's got some breeze, that's got some wind, some air movement, which certainly the Rhone Valley has. It's kind of known for that. The Le Mistral winds, as they call them, also coming down from the Alps, they kind of funnel down that Rhone Valley where the Rhone River cuts through. Yeah, anyways, I'm going to taste this wine because I've been chatting for 5 or so minutes, it looks like, and haven't had any juice to my lips yet. Yeah, right off the bat, pretty voluptuous, silky texture, some nice kind of fine-grained, not particularly prickly, but certainly present tannins that are drying both my tongue and the kind of lower sides of my cheeks out, but very juicy wine, vibrant, kind of rich in style. I think a lot of the Pinot Noir people of the world, especially that like a California style, would like this wine because it's in that similar vein. It has an elegance to it that I like, that I can relate to Pinot Noir with a little bit. But anyways, yeah, lovely, lovely wine. First sip. I usually don't judge wines on their first sip. It's my first sip of wine for the day as well. It's night outside. I'm not sure if you can tell through the window, but it is later in the evening. I try not to sip wine too early in the day because it makes me a little fuzzy. But yeah, so Gigondas, it's an area. It's got kind of just up from a river that I can't remember the name of, but and the elevation starting around 700 or so feet, kind of up to maybe 1,500 or so feet, and you've got varying soils. There's certainly most of it is kind of maritime, so it's old uplifting of old ocean sedimentary soils. Certainly a good amount of clay in them, but certain aspects have more lime as well that are mixed in, and marl. Yeah, a wine region that really is a little bit younger. Olive trees were planted there in the early 1900s, and there weren't particularly grapes there when phylloxera hit, the grape pest louse that came from America and wiped out all the vineyards over there. There weren't really vineyards here at that point in time in Gigondas before then, so they didn't wind up planting a lot of these vineyards really until a couple big freezes in the late 20s and 1950 something or other, where the olive trees were killed due to a really hard freeze, and they planted grapes, which can withstand that cold better than an olive tree. So in the kind of the modern French winemaking world, Gigondas itself, as a small village, is pretty new. And you're really looking at vines kind of in the 60s and 70s being planted, and but to me, it's got this this nice edge to it of tannin and such. That's really lovely off the bat. That kind of speaks to a warm climate with enough structure, but also this kind of cool elegance that you get from a kind of a longer growing season. Not too high temps, too many days. So, as I ramble on a little bit, kind of finding where I'm gonna settle into this wine. This area originally, though, was planted by the Romans even before then, in the first century BC. So it's not particularly an area that is one that's not suited for grapes by any means. Just other places were planted for grape cultivation centuries ago that possibly were easier to access, or olive trees have been planted here, and that's the scenario. But yeah, still a fairly a newcomer on the scene as far as European standards. But a lovely wine, and I'm gonna give it a little bit of some time to rest. Come back and visit with y'all in a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more maybe about the history and such of the area. Well, not particularly the history, because that's about all that I've done the research on. But usually it's about what they put into the bottles, that what counts when you go home. That really makes the difference. But we'll come back in a little bit, revisit, maybe change locales too, and see if the lighting over there is better, worse, or a little bit better ambiance. À bientôt!